My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And today, as my guest, I have Gary Mechanic. He's the founder of Friends of the Chicago Portage, and Gary is going to explain the Chicago birth story. And I don't think no one in the Chicagoland area has ever heard of the Chicago birth story. We had a lot of different versions, but Gary is going to give you the true version on how Chicago births got started. I'm glad you're on our show, Gary.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
And Gary, could you explain to our audience how you got involved and why you got involved and why you're so interested in the Chicago birth story?
Several years ago, I worked as general manager of the I&M Canal National Heritage Corridor.
So explain what I&M Canal is.
The I&M Canal is a canal like the Erie Canal that really led to the development of the city of Chicago. So a man-made canal that was hand-built by Irish immigrants from 1836 to 1848 and really drove the economic development of our city. But there are a number of organizations that make up the National Heritage Corridor. I was the general manager of one of them, and through that job, that organization was involved with the Chicago Portage National Historic Site. So I got to see people do tours there, and I understood very early on that this was a site that is largely undeveloped and is critical to the development of our region, of our city, and a great opportunity to do something where very few people had done anything about that place, other than leave it alone and leave it in a natural state.
And the I&M Canal is the Illinois and Michigan Canal.
Yes.
Where they connected the Illinois River to...
It was actually directly related to the story of the Chicago Portage. Chicago started out as a canoe portage, and a portage...
Yeah, what's a portage?
I'm glad you asked me that. A portage is a place where after you've been paddling along serenely, smoothly, easily on the water, you have to get out. You come to the end of the waterway. You have to get out and carry all your gear and your boats over a piece of land into another waterway. And this place, Chicago, was the connection between Lake Michigan and the Des Plaines River, between the Great Lakes and the Illinois River, and between the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. So in those days, before we built roads, when people were first traveling through North America and exploring this country, these portages were the critical links to get from one whole part of the country, one watershed, into another watershed. And we know from Lewis and Clark, once you cross over a continental divide, once you get into the Mississippi watershed, the rest of the country, the entire interior of North America is open to you.
Yes.
By water. So Chicago was that link between the east and the rest of the heart of North America.
And that is a Chicago portage. When you say the Chicago Portage now.
Well, there were many portages, and today canoers are probably the only people who use that word portage anymore. Yeah. If you go to the Boundary Waters, there's portages.
Yes.
But in those days, as people traveled through the country, it was very difficult to walk through the dense forests, a lot of dangers, and the waterways were relatively easy and open, and those places, like Chicago, were important links. So the very first maps that Europeans made of North America, even before the name Chicago was shown on the maps, if you look at the south end of Lake Michigan where Chicago is, it'll say Portage. And those were the key links that those early explorers were looking for.
Yeah, my sons and I, we spend a lot of days canoeing up in Canada. There.
So you know what a portage is, and you probably know what a rod is.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you know, what is a National Historic Site?
The National Park Service designates those places where our country was born as National Historic Sites. So like the Gettysburg Battlefield or Plymouth Rock, those places that are common to our history that are worth preserving. So the National Park Service designates national historic sites, national monuments, a whole list of national places, but the National Historic Site is their highest designation and rates the highest protection.
Now, do they own all of the National Historic Sites, or?
The Chicago Portage National Historic Site is one of the few in the country that is in non-federal ownership, not owned.
One of very few, yeah.
Not owned by the National Park Service. In this case, the Chicago Portage is owned by the Forest Preserve District of Cook County.
And why is the Chicago Portage a National Historic Site then?
Because it was key to the development of the city of Chicago, and Chicago is key to the development of the whole heartland of America. We think of Washington, D.C. as the political capital of our country, but for a great many years, and maybe still today, New York is the economic capital.
Yeah.
And Chicago, as it grew after the development of the I&M Canal, was really the economic capital of the Midwest. So from the Gulf of Mexico throughout the entire Great Lakes region, from the Appalachians to the Rocky Mountains, Chicago still today is a center of the economic development and the economic capital of that whole area.
You know, I agree with that, because if you have a depression or you can't find jobs any place in the United States, you could come to Chicago,
right,
and you could always find some type of job. I mean, the pay might not be good, but you could always find a job here in Chicago.
And that economic vibrancy is directly related, unlike many other cities that are not today what they originally started out like. Las Vegas, Atlantic City, Los Angeles was a mission. But Chicago is today and always has been about the same thing, about moving nature and moving goods and services from one side of the country, from east to west and from north to south. So that early portage, that early link that the early explorers used here in Chicago, grew to be replaced. It was a difficult portage. It was the easiest of all the portages from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi, but it still took days and a great deal of effort to move through the portage in its natural state. So it has been developed and replaced, first by the I&M Canal, later by railroads and roads. We had the world's busiest airport here long before O'Hare was built. And even today, if you look at a map of the internet, more of the big backbone connections of the information superhighway are here in Chicago. And that's all layered one on top of each other from the development of the portage.
Now, if I went to the Chicago Portage National Historic Site, what would I see there?
Well, it is a Cook County Forest Preserve, so it looks very much like a forest preserve. But as you enter, you'll first see a monumental statue of Joliet and Marquette and their Native American guide. This is a 20-foot high. We don't have a person in this image, but so you sort of miss the scale. But Joliet and Marquette standing there about 20 feet high.
I've seen that sculpture.
So
I fell in love with it. I wish I had that in my backyard.
Well, it's sculpted by a man, local artist, Ferdinand Rabicini, who created that sculpture in 1989.
Yes.
And it was erected. So it really marks the site. What you also see are a very few interpretive signs that, since our group has come into existence, we spearheaded a project to develop some interpretive signage. So we have a very nice kiosk, information on both sides, and a 3,000-foot paved interpretive trail that leads you around the site. You see the 3 or 4 interpretive signs.
You know, I felt like I was back in the days of Marquette and Joliet.
Well,
I really enjoyed walking through that site, because you're right there when they first discovered that site.
And it has been, even though it's been preserved as a natural area, there's really been a lot of disturbance, civil engineering, a great deal of hand-dug earthworks that are on that site that you walk over, you walk around, and don't even notice unless somebody points it out to you. There's a beautiful trail through the woods.
Your school groups goes out and look at it also?
Well, in conjunction with developing this organization, Friends of the Chicago Portage, we also at the same time got an Illinois First grant to develop a curricula for teachers about the early history of Chicago, using the Chicago Portage as a focus.
Yes.
So now teachers and their students throughout the region can download that curricula off of our website. It's available free, and teachers throughout the region can, with their students, explore the early history of Chicago. It's not the kind of curricula where here's the story, here are the facts, here are the objects. We don't just lay it out for the students and teachers, but provide them with the tools so that they themselves can become explorers and find the birth story of Chicago themselves through this curricula and using the site.
Now tell me about Friends of the Chicago Portage.
Friends of the Chicago Portage was started on the very anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the designation of the Chicago Portage as a national
I see them on the
site.
screen. There's Friends of the Chicago Portage. Yes.
We have a partnership with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, so we work closely with them. Friends of the Chicago Portage is dedicated to the full interpretation, appropriate development, and ecological restoration of the Chicago Portage National Historic Site. So we do basically two things. We do free public tours during the warm weather from April until October on Saturday mornings. And if you look at our website, you'll see when our tours are.
Yeah, my wife and I, we went on a tour. We enjoyed it very much.
And we also do ecological restoration workdays on the last Saturday of every month throughout the year. And many of our forest preserves, our natural areas, have been degraded by lack of natural fire, the natural elements that created this landscape. So we have to go out and to improve the health of that area, sort of weed the woods just as you would weed your backyard. Take out the invasive species. Here we have a picture of our volunteers in the winter. We build big bonfires and burn the brush that we've cut through the season. I think you see Santa, one of our
Santa.
volunteers out there on a work day, burning brush piles. And during the summer months, we maintain the trail, keep the place clean, and make it safe for visitors.
Sure. And you do have a lot of invasive species coming up there.
Quite a bit.
Yes.
As we took out the buckthorn that shaded the forest floor, then the very next aggressive invasive species, garlic mustard, invaded. And we spent quite a lot of time and a lot of volunteer hours hand pulling that garlic mustard out over several years. And we've actually started to make an impact and have some weed-free areas that we can look through with great pride now.
Now, can you tell me a bit more about the public tours?
We do the free public tours on the last Saturday of every month, beginning at 10 o'clock. The tours walk the 3,000-foot interpretive trail. They last about an hour and a half.
Yes.
And we tell only about a half a dozen of the 50 or so fascinating stories that are related to the Chicago Portage. We talk about the geological history of the Chicago area, how it was, the Portage was created, and how this link between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico was created. We talk about the early explorers, Joliet and Marquette, and LaSalle, the people who followed them. The Fort Dearborn era and John Kinsey, Gordon Hubbard, and the creation of the city of Chicago. We talk about the development of the I&M Canal, how it replaced the Chicago Portage and how it led to the development of our great city. And then finally, we talk about what the future of the Chicago Portage might be and how people can help us in our mission to develop this site.
Now, you know, you talked about Joliet and Marquette. Who are they, and why should we remember Joliet and Marquette?
Well, Chicago's history, I'm a third-generation Chicagoan. I went to 12 years of Chicago public schools.
Yes.
I graduated from one of the best schools in Chicago,
Yeah.
and I didn't know anything about Chicago history. For me, Chicago history started with John Kinsey and the Fort Dearborn in 1803, but there were more than 130 years of European non-native history. I'm trying to stop saying European history because there were other people from other areas of the world that were in this area too. But after the Native Americans, the Joliet and Marquette were the first white men to pass through Chicago and write about it. Now, there were probably explorers who passed through before, or traders, but they might have been underground, they might have been illegal, they might have been hiding from the law. Marquette, as a Jesuit priest, knew how to write and recorded his journal of their 5-month-long, 3,000-mile voyage to find the Mississippi. On their way back from discovering the Mississippi, they passed through the Chicago Portage, and Joliet noticed that this one place, this portage, this short portage, he said when he went back to Canada and reported to the governor of New France, you all know where New France is, Canada, he said that if we cut a canal of a half a league through this area, we could go by very easy navigation from France all the way to the Gulf of Mexico through the heart of the country. That idea took 160 years before it was actually realized in the development of the I&M Canal, but that idea is what led to a great city growing here.
Now, Marquette, do we have his notes, or did it get lost?
Joliet, the cartographer, who made accurate maps, and of course wrote a journal himself of that entire voyage. At the very end of that voyage, when his hometown was in sight, turned over his canoe and lost his chest full of maps and notes and his journals. So all we have is Marquette's journal. And if you look online and do a search for the Jesuit relations, you can find Marquette's entire journal of that journey and his return to the Chicago area the next year, and finally his death in 1674. All that has been translated out of the original Latin into French, into English, so you can read it in our own language.
Well, the Jesuits, they always stay alive, those Jesuits.
And they kept good records. So he had a great PR agency. So now, all through the Great Lakes, there's Marquette, Michigan, Marquette River, Marquette University. There's very few.
Joliet, except the town of Joliet. You know, I watched your 30-minute film on and mentioned that Marquette and Joliet did not know about this portage, but they stopped at an Indian tribe. Was that around Peoria? Or
on their way up the Illinois River, they were finding their way through the country because there were no maps. So they were really exploring, and at the last village that they stopped at, on an island near Starved Rock, Marquette preached to the Indians for several days, and the chief was so impressed with Marquette's words that he offered to guide them up the river to this shortcut from the Des Plaines River into the Chicago River and out to Lake Michigan.
Now, there's a DVD that you have out there that we're going to show.
In the last year, Friends of the Chicago River, Friends of the Chicago Portage. I also work for Friends of the Chicago River. Friends of the Chicago Portage has produced our own 30-minute long documentary about the Chicago Portage called Connecting Worlds, the Story of the Chicago Portage. It's not available for sale, but it's available free to people who join Friends of the Chicago Portage or renew their membership. And we've put together just a short trailer that I brought today so we could show just a short piece of that.
And this is what we're going to see now.
Yes.
This about a 3-minute...
This is Connecting Worlds, the Story of the Chicago Portage, produced by Mark McLean, one of our members.
Within the span of only a few hundred years, the vast prairie lands of northeastern Illinois were transformed into one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. Chicago is the financial, cultural, transportation, and business capital of the Midwest. It boasts some of the world's tallest buildings. And the Chicago area is home to over 9 million people. But very few people that live and work in this city ever stop and wonder why this city is here. Why Chicago? Paris, the fashion capital of the world. In the late 18th and early 19th century, the newest fashion sensation throughout all of Europe is the beaver hat. They're stylish as well as practical. Beaver fur is extremely water resistant.
There's something in the beaver pelt which is similar to the lanolin in wool, which repels water. Beavers are aquatic animals and just naturally needed that repellent in their fur.
But the beaver had been hunted almost to extinction in Western Europe. The chief supply now comes from the New World.
Well, the fur trade was so important to early American history because the Europeans, they regarded furs as a symbol of social status. Yet they had chopped down most of their forests and overhunted most of their game. And so these were ultimate luxury goods in Europe, and people were willing to pay a very heavy price for them. The normal manufactured goods, weapons such as knives and muskets, that the Europeans took for granted were products that American Indians had no other access to. And so for them, these were fantastic luxury or high-end, high-tech goods that they were very desirous of having.
But transporting those trade goods between the frontier and the East Coast is no easy task. The goods must be bundled and loaded into large canoes and transported the fastest and most efficient way, on water. Waterways were the superhighways of the fur trade era. When waterways didn't meet or the water level dropped too low during the dry season, the canoes and their cargo had to be carried, or portaged.
Portages were critical to the development of all of North America because it was through the waterways that so much of the continent was settled. And portages are simply those breakpoints between one method of water transportation and another method of water transportation, sometimes going by lake, and you have a portage, in our case, to a river system. So in that sense, portages are sort of like the ligaments of the transportation system in pre-modern America, and they allow for the movement of both goods and people over a vast area of the continent.
There were many portages in the early history of America, but there was one that was to become of particular interest to those traveling in the American wilderness. It was located in a swampy area known by the local natives for the pungent smell of onions, which grew wild there. They called it Chicago.
The Chicago Portage is the venturi through which we connect the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence and North Atlantic water with the Des Plaines and the Illinois rivers and the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. It's a narrow point through which travelers, traders pass through Chicago.
Well, excellent video that we just saw, and it's a 30-minute. You just compress it now to 3 minutes.
Just a little teaser.
Yes, a little teaser, and you give this to new members.
We haven't cleared all the permissions, so
Okay.
at the moment we can't sell it. We just give it as a gift to our new members and renewing members. So join Friends of the Chicago Portage, and we'll send you a copy of our DVD.
And to join, they can look on your website and
Yes.
and enroll, and that's excellent. Now, talking about history or watching it, it might be interesting, but why should it matter to anyone? Why should one want to know about Chicago's birth story?
I don't think it matters that if you know that Joliet and Marquette passed through here in 1673 or 1764. The dates aren't important, but Chicago, why this city grew here, why it grew, what it depended on, what it still depends on, what made it strong, what still drives the economic engines of today is a continuous story that goes back to Joliet and Marquette. And if you live here, if you raise children here, and you don't know what made this city great, why a great city grew in this place, or what drives it today, then you're a stranger in a strange land. I think history, the important part of history, is about, it tells us who we are and what our place is in this country and in the world. So it's important not just for people who've lived here, like myself as a third-generation Chicagoan, to understand the story, but Chicago's a port of entry, and these people who come here become citizens and taxpayers and voters. If we don't understand what made this city great, we would tend to make bad decisions about its future. So we need to understand where we've come from, what makes the city great, what it depends on in order to make good decisions and keep it strong and vibrant and growing.
Well, what is the future of the Chicago Portage then?
Well, Friends of the Chicago Portage has a vision for how to appropriately and fully develop this site. It is one of the richest archaeological sites in northern Illinois, so it's difficult in the small 90 acres of property to develop any sort of large-scale interpretive center, museum, visitor center.
And that's on the stream. What do you plan to do?
Next door to the Chicago Portage is MWRD property that we hope we can sometime in the future clean up and restore and create a interpretive museum. Previous economic feasibility studies showed that as a National Historic Site near a major metropolitan area, this site would draw 400,000 to 1 million visitors a year, and that might sound outrageous, but the other National Historic Site in Illinois, the Lincoln Home in Springfields, draws nearly 400,000 visitors a year in the middle of Illinois, in the middle of cornfields. Yeah. So great potential for economic development and interpretation and understanding, cultural understanding of Chicago. This site has a great potential to do all that.
And we're living up here in Chicago, the Great Lakes. We have Lake Michigan, we have the Illinois River, Des Plaines River. I mean, we have a lot of waterways here. And if our kids or people living here in the Midwest doesn't realize the importance of waterways and how it grew in this area, what made this area grow because of our waterways.
Right.
And I think this is a key that you're trying to...
And that we still depend on.
Oh, yeah, we still depend on it. It's correct. Because the fishing industry is a big industry, and our barges are still coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah.